In my course at Columbia College in Chicago, Exploring the Goddess, one of the texts I use is The Chalice and the Blade by Riane Eisler. Written more than 20 years ago now, this book has been a landmark in terms of people learning to appreciate that the world of domination that we live in, a world in which people tread on others to get ahead, a world of violence, a world of cruelty, was not necessarily the history of humankind, and that there may have been a golden age in which men and women lived in partnership and peace. I believe, if this is true, that this really happened in Malta, in the middle of the Mediterranean, between Sicily and North Africa, 60 miles south of Sicily to be precise, and 200 miles of the North African coast. Malta is a tiny little... The Maltese Islands were probably a sanctuary some 6,000 years ago for goddess worship, for a religious tradition in which fertility was honored, and also the dead were given rebirth. We do not know any of the details of what the worship was like, because there is no written record, and the archaeologists who discovered the magnificent temples on the islands, the oldest temples in the world, didn't keep a written record of their discoveries or where they were positioned. Moreover, the farmers stole megaliths to build walls. People desecrated the megaliths, thinking they were anti-Christian. And so it is that the temples fell into disrepair, even though they're one of the wonders of the world. But the Maltese temples, for me, are key to remembering that time in history when there may have been a partnership model. On the Maltese Islands, there are a total of 30 megalithic sites that have been found, and the island's square footage is no more than 125 square miles. So in this 125-mile radius, is that the right word? In this 125-mile square island, we have 30 megalithic temples, each of which must have taken hundreds of years to build, and each of which would have involved hundreds of people, if not thousands, in the building. It would have been impossible to have engaged in warfare while these temples were being constructed. All the population was needed to move the enormous megaliths, the large stones, some of which weighed 20 tons or more, and they were moved on small rollers, stones this big having been hewn out of the rock, and they were rolled for great distances and then put into upright position, and then one megalith placed horizontally on top of two verticals to create an entranceway. The temples were enormous. They were multi-chambered. They had altars and beautiful, beautiful decorations of spirals and animals. There were sacrificial ovens where animals may have been sacrificed. There were places where burnt offerings were made, and libation holes in the ground for the pouring of liquid. And all these rites, all these rituals were most likely conducted not only by men, but probably by women, and perhaps by women in a place of power, in partnership with men. There are some masculine symbols that were found in these temples, a triple phallus in one temple, for example, but predominantly the imagery suggests feminine, the divine feminine. And so for me, these temples are a reminder of a time in history when women did have spiritual power that was recognized, and they are a challenge for us today to actualize that power which is within, even if we don't recognize it. For while women have been degraded and debased, they still have that spiritual power. It just has to be accessed. And so my hope for the world then is that through connecting with the divine feminine, whether through archaeology or sociology or through spirituality, whichever way it comes to us, whether through literature, sacred texts, or our own encounters with mystery, that somehow connecting with the divine feminine, our new ways of imaging and naming God, will empower us to look for a different future for our world, in which we reverence the earth and her rhythms, in which we respect the earth and work for her enrichment and protection, in which we fight against global warming instead of against myriad enemies of different cultures. May we put our efforts then into reverencing Mother Earth, our primary divine symbol, instead of into making war and causing hatred and causing terrorism and acting in cruelty to one another. Amen.